Welcome everyone, joining us on the second of our Elevating Women in Leadership taster sessions. So thank you for joining us as we explore some different topics over the next few weeks. So my name's Orla Power and I design and deliver our Elevating Women in Leadership programs. I'm also joined today by Sinead, who's our guest speaker, and I'll be asking her towards the end of the session to share her experiences as a woman leader on today's topic of confidence and resilience. And I've also got Leslie today, our project manager, who's producing and helping me out as we go through the session. So let me just quickly recap on these taster sessions for those of you who might be joining for the first time. Originally, we intended to give a flavour of how we deliver these programmes for organisations thinking about introducing women in leadership programmes. But I know a lot of you are joining today because you would like development for yourselves. So we really want to share as much as we can and meet both of those needs. So for those of you thinking about your development, I've created a worksheet for you to reflect on after this session. So that will be sent out afterwards. Plus you'll also get a recording of today as a reminder. We've also offered 1 month free access to Develop Me, which has a range of career tools. So for those of you on that first session who requested that, you should be getting those links soon. And we've also offered 2 one-to-one coaching sessions for those of you who'd really like some additional support. And we have been able to manage all of the requests from the first session. So if there are any additional requests, we'll aim to get those to you. But there might be a bit of a delay while we deal with the first requests they've had. But if you'd like those, please do contact us on ewil@lhh.com. And then for those of you joining for your own development, we talked about finding a buddy to talk through what comes up for you in these sessions. So we do that on our programs. And some of you asked for buddies from within this group. So if you did, we'll be matching you up and you should shortly receive that connection. And then lastly, because of the huge take-up that we've had on these webinar formats, on these sessions, we're using this webinar format. So it's slightly different to our normal virtual learning platform. So it limits interactivity a bit. So we can't do breakout rooms and whiteboard, but we can use polls and the chat. So get ready as I'll be asking you to use those as we go through. And as Graham mentioned, if you have any questions, please use the Q&A button and we'll answer those. We're aiming to have at least 10 minutes at the end for questions and answers. So at the last taster session, I took you through the first part of the programme from the launch and we looked at career development. So before this strengthening confidence and resilience session I'm going to talk about today, you would have attended a discovery session. So let me just mention about those. So the discovery sessions are run in smaller groups of 8 to 10. So we have a big cohort of up to 20 and we'd split those into 2 smaller groups. And it's really that opportunity to share successes and actions since the last workshop. So I know it's only a week, but if those of you that joined last session have got any actions or progress that you've made, do feel free to share those in the chat because we'd love to hear those. And then secondly, it's an opportunity to, let me just move that. Secondly, then it's an opportunity to really share those personal challenges or topics and get that group support. We use a variety of facilitation and coaching tools to help participants explore and find solutions. So I've also created a little facilitation guide. So if any of you would like to use that, I'm sharing one of the most popular tools that we use. It's quite a simple method and it seems to be the most popular with the participants. You find it quite easy to pick it up. And then they can continue to run those discovery sessions once the program's finished. So if you've got a group of people together in your own organisation, then perhaps you could have a go at using that particular tool. So let me just check the chat. I've seen a few things come in terms of actions. So fantastic. So someone's had a review about their personal development plan. Love that. So also, what else have we got? And also maybe supporting others to come and join these sessions as well. So yes, spread the word and enable others to get as much as they can from these sessions. Lovely, okay. So for today's taster session, we're going to be focusing on strengthening confidence and resilience. So let's get going on this topic. So this workshop is aimed at helping you focus on your key strengths. If you were there last time, you remember that I talked about in our research, women who are successful in accelerating their careers show this high degree of confidence. And something that can get in the way of this is doubting our own potential. So we start off by focusing on strengths. We then look at resilience. So women tend to be managing multiple demands on our energy across work and home. So how can we manage this effectively and maybe stop striving to be superwoman or superhuman? Nick Walkley, who was our speaker on the last session, that's his favorite phrase. He says, stop trying to be superhuman, just be super and human. So that always makes me laugh and stops me putting my pants on the outside and diving in. We're also going to be looking at limiting beliefs and holding on to our negative thoughts. So we can be quite hard on ourselves. So how do we reframe our mindset to think more positively? So by the end of this session, can you answer this question? What do I need to be at my most resilient and confident best? What do I need to be at my most resilient and confident best? So that's what we're going to be exploring in this session. So if this was the real workshop, we'd be obviously welcoming participants back, and we'd love to hear from all of you, obviously. But a quick little icebreaker. So as this session is about energy, let's see where your energy is today. So give me a 1 to 5 in the chat on how charged up you feel your battery is today. So is it 5, you're, firing on all 4 cylinders, or do we have that sort of midweek feeling somewhere in the middle, or have we run down our battery already? So let me have a look and see what we're putting in the, 4s, 3s, 4s, yeah, maybe a little bit of that midweek feeling. So yeah, someone's fasting and it can be quite tiring. Yeah, that's a way of draining our energy. We're going to talk about that later. A little bit of a 2, so perhaps lots of things happening, 2.5, 3.5. Okay, perfect. So, it doesn't matter where you are, it's about noticing what your energy is like. And we're going to talk a little bit about today about how can we find some ways to recharge that battery. So why confidence and resilience as topics? Well, I've mentioned these already, doubting our own potential, striving to be superwoman, and maybe holding on to those negative thoughts. And I've not put anything on the male side, because I'm not saying that men don't experience these things as well, but they are themes from the research that can create headwinds and slow down women's progression. So for example, yes, men do have limiting beliefs. However, we notice that women tend to hold on to them for longer. So how do we move through those? So those are the topics for today. So what do we mean by confidence and resilience? So confidence is about our self-belief, and then resilience is our ability to bounce back and remain energized despite what's thrown at us. So in our workshops, we start off by looking at our strengths. And if you'd like to answer this question in the chat, please do. So feel free to answer that. And while you're posting your thoughts on how does knowing your strengths help us lead with confidence, I'm going to tell you a quick little story. So while you think about that question and post any answers if you'd like to, just a story to highlight about strength. So it's about this man, Daley Thompson. So some say he's one of our greatest decathletes of all time. So in that decathlon, there's 10 track and field events, and your points build up over the competition, depending on how well you do in each event. And I once heard his coach speak And his coach was talking to Daly. Daly was preparing for his first Olympics. I think it was around about 1980. And his coach said, okay, Daly, what do you want to work on? And he said, right, I want to work on the 1500 meters because that's my weakest event. And, you know, if you see him there, he's quite a stocky guy, and he found running the most challenging. And that 1500 meters, that's quite a long run. And his coach said to him, okay, but that's not what we're going to do. So to prepare you for the Olympics, we're going to work on the 9 events that you're already good at and focus all of your effort on those, so that by the time you get to the 1500 meters, and the 1500 meters was the last event that's completed in the decathlon, he said, by the time you get to the 1500 meters, you'll be so far ahead that you'll only need to get round the track and complete the race, because you'll know that you've already won. And that's what happened. By the time Daly got to that 9th event, he was far enough ahead that he knew he had the gold medal in the bag. And all he had to do was get round the track and finish. So that's I love that little story, just because it really highlights that we can spend a lot of time and energy focusing on our weaknesses and not enough time stretching and strengthening our strengths. So as long as our weaknesses don't stop us getting around the track, so he still had to complete the race, then, you know, we can still do so much more with our strengths. So what have we got for answers in this? So yes, lovely, understanding your own perspectives, how this impacts your work, hold yourself in high regard, yeah. Helps recognize the value you add to others, positive affirmation, yeah, fantastic. So some great answers there around strengths. Yes, they really help us to excel. They also boost our resilience, and they help us show the best version of our authentic selves. And we're going to talk a bit more about authenticity in the next session, but they're also a really important part of that. So in our programs, we recommend the use of an assessment tool to help participants focus on their strengths. We mostly use Strengthscope, which is the most popular with clients, but it could be anything, and whatever's most appropriate for the group. So we'd love to give you all Strengthscope, but I'm afraid we can't do that. But you could reflect for yourselves on what you think your strengths are. And one way to do that is to think about times when you are, I'm going to say, in the flow. So think about times when you are most energized, you know, time flies by, you're firing on all 4 cylinders. And when you finish doing what you're doing, you still feel energized. So just have a think about, what are the situations that happens in? What are you doing? What is going on for you? And it's really highly likely that you'll be working to your strengths, the things that energize you. So I've put some suggestions on your worksheet for you to think about after the session. And for participants, they will get a Strengthscope report, which looks like this. And in the center, you'll see that it's identified for this particular person, their 7 signature strengths. So those are listed in the middle. And then round the outside, they're shown as those purple arrows. So you can also see whether your strengths are in any particular cluster. So for this person, they've got quite a few in that relational quadrant. So the participants receive their reports in advance, so they've got time to reflect before the session. And then we run a number of breakout sessions for them so that they can share you know, what their strengths are, what they're drawing from that. We also look at strengths in overdrive. So sometimes that can hold us back if we're doing too much with our strengths. And what are some of the triggers for those? So these are things, as I say, it's on your worksheet. These are things that perhaps you could think about and explore with your buddy or someone that you'd like to talk to this about. So thinking about strengths in overdrive, and then how to dial down. So we share some ideas about how to dial down those strengths in overdrive and what we can do to make the most of operating in that strong position. So that's the first part of the morning, and hopefully this has started your thinking on what your strengths are for you. And as I say, you can use your worksheet to explore that further after the session. So in real life, this would be about 75 minutes into the session. So it's time to, we give everyone a break for 20 minutes and get them to move about and get away from the screen. So the next session we move on to, let's look at energy. So strengths energize us. So we're thinking about, with all of that energy, how are we using that energy? So how many of us, I'm going to ask you today, how many of us feel like we're spinning plates, we're juggling lots of things, and we're probably really good at it. But sometimes we spread ourselves too thin and we don't balance out our energy. And I think particularly for all of us, you know, COVID's really shown that. And I don't think any of us thought we'd be adding, you know, maybe teacher and IT specialist to our list of roles this year, but there we are. So let's explore some life stages. And so just a heads up warning that I'm going to be referring to age, so prepare yourselves. You won't have to share it, but I might share mine. So I'm using this model by Donald Super just to get us thinking about life stages and roles. Sometimes it's called the life career rainbow. So up the center, we have possible life roles. So start to think about different roles that you have at different times in your lives. So if we start at the bottom, child is the time and energy that you use relating to your parents. So obviously a lot of time and energy in your early life, and potentially an increase if you're caring for elderly parents. So student, the time you spend studying, high in early life, but obviously we can still do that throughout our lives, so might pop up again. Leisure-right, that's an interesting word that Super invented, and this was to describe the time that we spend on our leisure activities, so with friends, hobbies, interests, that time. Citizen, things you do working for the community or unpaid volunteer work, so that's the, you know, running the scouts or, you know, charity activities. Obviously worker, time at work, parent caring for children, and then homemaking, so maintaining your home life, cooking, cleaning, DIY, admin, internet shopping, that's most of mine. And the spots represent how much time and energy you spend in each role. So this is just an example, and obviously it will be personal to you. So why do we do this? So thinking about our life stage helps us reflect on whether we have that balance of energy right for us and our circumstances. And also then how much energy we have to then put into our careers. So if we think about our career alongside our life stage, you know, where are you? So I'm going to be polling you on your sort of career stage. And Super talks about 5. I'm going to skip growth because that's the sort of very early years. So exploration is about thinking about your career choices. And again, you know, it looks like that's early, but some of us that can come back again. So we might be thinking about a second career or reevaluating our career choices and thinking about, have I made the right one? Do I want a complete change? So exploration can happen at any stage. So is that where you're at? What about establishment? So this is building your career experience. So developing depth. So you know what you know, area your career is in and you're developing that depth. Or are you at maintenance, keeping up to date and developing that breadth? And then disengagement is moving away from paid work. So it's not necessarily that you're disengaged with work, although you might be. It's moving away from paid work or stepping out. So usually as you're approaching retirement, that could happen for other reasons. You might want to go traveling or start a family. So it's about that stepping away from paid work. So Leslie, let's just poll and see where you are as a group, just so I can see where you think, what career stage you're at. And then while you're polling, I'll just share. So for me, as I say, mentioning age, I'm coming up to 55. So I'm thinking, what do I want the last 10 years of my career to look like? So I'm probably in that maintenance and starting to move to disengagement. I've got a 14-year-old son, so I've still got a lot of parenting energy to find, and an 80-year-old dad, so I've still got that child energy. So I want to have more time and energy for both of these things. So hopefully that's got you thinking about, and I'm just looking at the polls as they're coming in. So it looks like establishment, there's nearly 60% of you that are building your career experience and developing that depth. And then there's another group of you that also maintenance, so keeping up to date and developing that breadth, so maybe very experienced in what you do. And then some of us that exploration, not many in disengagement, so only me then. But yeah, thinking about where are you in your career chart. So hopefully that's got you thinking. So hopefully this has got you starting to think about how balanced are your roles currently and what would be your ideal. And some people find it helpful to draw this out. Let me just say that obviously on the programme, you'd get a chance to discuss what we've been talking about in your pairs. And some people find it helpful rather than the career rainbow. So some people find it helpful to draw out as a pie chart rather than a rainbow. So drawing out, how your time and energy is shared. And one of the things, when we run this session, one of the things we often hear is that when some women think about this, they realise that if they've had caring responsibilities outside of work, that they have maybe powered down in their careers. So they're still doing a good job, obviously, but might not be taking on that extra opportunity or added responsibility so that they have enough energy to go around. But when that caring reduces, maybe the kids move up to senior school or go to university, women forget to power back up again. They're so used to thinking about others that they forget to focus on themselves again, and that there might be that extra energy capacity to, re-motivate, re-engage, rethink about what else can we do to expand our careers. So just putting that out there, as that often comes out as a topic of conversation. So we're looking at where we want to spend our time and energy, and then what options and choices we have to achieve the desired balance. So we've got a current role and then an ideal role. So it's a really good opportunity to have a bit of a time review, a bit of a time audit. Are there time stealers that have crept in, ways to rethink what you do? So I'll just share with you a really small example because it's fresh in my mind this morning. But I've recently got 30 minutes back at the start of each day. So we live 25 minutes from school, and yet my son was leaving it really late, last minute, and then, Mum, can I have a lift? And before I knew it, that became the routine that we'd be dropping him off at school. So a few weeks ago, I set new boundaries, no lifts unless it's pouring with rain. And, he's been late every day for a week, but this week he's back on track, he's getting in. And now I finish 30 minutes earlier each day. So I've got 30 minutes back, and I can, so far, I fitted in a run before tea, and I'm going to start reading those women in leadership books that are piling up on my desk. So I know it's only a small example, but thinking about how can we time audit and really think about where we're spending our time and energy. And I'm sure if I could hear all of your examples, as we would do in a workshop, we'll learn lots and lots of different ways to redistribute our energy. And often the key to it is managing boundaries. So this is what we often let slip. Our boundaries start to merge. So consider what boundaries you might need to manage to preserve your energy. Is this around time, start and finish times of the day? Is it around workload? Have extra things crept in that you've agreed to that you might need to, have a refresh on? Is it people, family, friends? Is it overcommitted? Have you taken on that role at the school on the PTA that's overcommitted you? It's going to be really personal to you, but it's a really good chance to just have that sort of stock taken audit and really think about what can you refocus so that you're focusing your time and energy. As the previous said, we've only got 1 cup of energy and we have to make it fit amongst lots of different things. So the final part of this session is then, how do we look after ourselves and keep that energy high? So as part of their pre-work, participants complete an energy assessment, and there are, you can Google it, there are lots on the website. The one that we use looks at 4 areas, and I'm going to poll you in a minute to see which of these you think you might need to strengthen. So it looks at 4 areas. So first of all, spiritual energy. So this is about working on what you do best. Are you fulfilling your values at work and really feeling a sense of purpose in the things that you do? What about physical energy? So this is where I've been topping up. So looking after your body, your sleep, exercise, food. Emotional energy. So this is about attention to how you feel, letting go of those negative emotions and getting balance. And then lastly, that mental energy. So being focused, staying positive, mindfulness, and being really present to now. So Leslie, let's just poll and see where people think they might need to pay a little bit of attention. So what type of energy do you think you might need to strengthen to increase your resilience? Yeah, the results are coming in. Looks like similar physical is quite popular. Well, there's a good spread across all 3, so perfect. So in this real session, if we were running this for real, we would send you away with your buddy. So you do a walk and talk. So we talk about this, you've completed your assessment, and then you'd have a chance to chat this through with someone away from the screen, maybe, walking around the house or get out to the garden, so that you can have that really good coaching conversation. And this activity is on the worksheet for you to do after the session today. So, okay, let's end the polling and see what we've got as a result. Okay, oh, mental energy. So mental energy is there. So thinking, having that positive attitude. Yeah, I think particularly this year, we've all had to think about our mental energy and well-being and regaining that perspective. So yeah, real challenge around that area. So things that we can do to strengthen that. And again, if we were in an open session, we'd be able to share lots of ideas and hear from others about how we've done that. And that's where often the speakers that we have on the programme can also be sharing some of their examples of how they've done that for themselves. And that's what would be coming up after lunch. So, perfect. Let me just... So, as I say, we'd send them off to have their buddy talk. We'd be stopping for lunch, so it's an hour for lunch. And then after lunch, we always have speakers on each workshop because women really like to hear other stories and experiences. And I'll finish off this session and then we'll come back and hear from Sinead about her experiences. And that would usually last about 45 minutes. So a bit of a chat from the person. We're going to have a shorter session today, but and then some questions and answers. So we'd have a break at this point, and then let me just finish off the last session that we cover, and then we'll have a chat with Sinead. So the last session that we cover is all around mindset and beliefs. So our Elevating Women in Leadership study found that women who were successful in advancing, they differed markedly in their mindset and beliefs. So they held this belief that there were no barriers for themselves. I mean, there might have been factors all around them that could have prevented their success, but they didn't let that get in the way of their own beliefs around what they could personally accomplish. So it's worth thinking about whether you have beliefs and mindsets that make it harder or easier, because it can be helpful, for you to live up to your full potential of who you are and what you can accomplish. So we all walk into situations at work every day with possibly mindsets that are unhelpful. So ones I've had this week are, this meeting's going to be a waste of my time before we've even started, or, I'm feeling a bit out of depth in this conversation. So those mindsets have they have a huge impact on our confidence and presence and how we come across to others. So what you tell yourself, that head talk, really matters because it does show up. We also have a number of beliefs that can be helpful or unhelpful. So for example, one of mine is I've been brought up to believe in the value of hard work. Okay, nothing's worth doing unless you do it well. So the good thing is I have a strong work ethic, so that's good. However, it also leads me to strive for perfection. So I am a real perfectionist, and I know I put too much time into things that don't require as much effort. And of course, that comes at the expense of other things. So let me share some common ones. And again, I'm going to poll you and see if any of these resonate with you. So the first one is imposter syndrome. So that's a famous one. So if you've ever had that feeling like, oh, I'm going to be found out, I'm not good enough. So it's typical when we take a new job or opportunity, but it can happen at any time. So I noticed this one in myself when I'm working with a new client and I start thinking, oh, am I going to be able to add value for them? And putting yourself down, so thinking that you're not good enough. Perfectionist, so I've mentioned that one. So I try and strive for excellence rather than perfection and not spending too much time on things. And then excessive worry, so that thing, oh, it's all going to go wrong, we're doomed. My son has this, so we have to work quite hard with him to change his mindset around that. Intolerance of uncertainty, so anxiety about not knowing, wanting to be fully prepared and not get caught out. And maybe afraid of showing weakness, so not wanting to ask for help or admit difficulties. So here are just a few, just to get you thinking to see if any resonate. And Leslie, let's poll whether these resonate with people. And of course, there are lots more, so there could be many others, but just to see if any of these resonate. And I did put none of these on there, so it might be something else, or you're not that sort of person, that you've got that ability to have really positive mindset and beliefs, which is fantastic. Okay, so there's quite a good spread across all of these. So should we end that, Leslie, and we'll just take a quick snapshot. Okay, also imposter syndrome, yeah, it's probably the one most people have heard of. So that one is quite popular. Putting yourself down, afraid of showing weakness, yeah. None of these, so some of you might be something else. So yeah, good spread. So some of us might have one, might have several of these. So what do we do? So the first part is actually recognizing that we might have these limiting beliefs, and are they getting in the way for us? But the second thing is, what do we do about those? So if we were working together in a workshop, we would work together on some real examples from the participants. So how do we change that mindset and put it in a more positive frame? But for the purposes of today, I've just created a few examples to give you the idea, because again, this is on your worksheet to maybe talk through with someone else or do some reflection on how could you reframe some of these things that we tell ourselves. And the important thing is to find what works for you. So, but just a few examples. So if you are aware of having that imposter syndrome, just think about a different mindset, that it's okay not to know everything. I can find out. I'm a resourceful person. So, it's not going to be possible for me to know everything that's out there. So that might help with reframing that imposter mindset. If we're putting ourselves down, this is where the strengths can really come in. I have strengths and I have much to offer. On one of the events recently, one of the participants said, they were thinking of applying for this role that had come up, but they were like, oh, there'll be loads of people applying. I've heard there's 45 applicants. So, there's no point. I'm never going to get it. After this session, she applied, and of course she got it. 45 people applied and she was the one that got it. So, think about, I have strengths and I've got lots to offer. Excessive worry. So, if it does go wrong, and it might, then I know I can deal with it and I can learn from it. It's about what I learn and how I take that forward. And lastly, perfectionism. So this is the one that I work on. So it's okay to make a mistake, and I try and focus on doing an excellent job rather than a perfect job. So these are just some of my thoughts. They might work for you, might not. The important thing is that you personalize these and really work those out for yourselves. So this is on your worksheet to work on after the session. And obviously on the workshop, we give people that opportunity to have that discussion. So we're coming to the end of the workshop and the close and the different things that we've covered. So we would send everyone out to have their buddy conversations so that they can talk about what they've taken from the session, and we come back into the main room to review and share those insights. And then the final close is talking to the group about obviously maintaining their buddy relationship, the things they're going to put into practice that we can then share at the discovery session that would follow this workshop, and any of the pre-work for the next session. So hopefully that's given you a flavour of this particular session and some takeaways and things for you to think about. Just before we move on to hear from our speaker about her thoughts about confidence and resilience, let me just remind you what's coming up next. So our next session is leading with presence and impact. So we're looking at authenticity, personal brand, and promoting ourselves positively. I'm also going to be joined by a couple of guests next year. So Felicia, one of our facilitators, is joining me. And I've also got Ingrid and Sally, who are real specialists in presence. They work with a lot of CEOs and board member women on how to increase their impact, particularly physically. So I think you'll enjoy hearing from them. If you'd like a little bit of homework, so those that are working on your development, just a little bit of homework that will help you prepare for the next session. So pick a few people who know you well and ask them for 5 words that best describe you. So just off the top of their head, don't give them too long to think about it. And you'll find this useful. If you can collect that, you'll find it useful when we look at personal brand next week and for some of your reflections. So just 5 words off the top of their heads. What 5 words would they attribute to you? So that's a little bit of homework if you want to do that. And then obviously keep up your buddy conversations to review your actions and thinking from these sessions. So as I mentioned today, you'll get a worksheet. I'll send you the discovery session guide. If you'd like access to Develop Me or one-to-one coaching, if you didn't hear about that on the first session, contact us on the ewil@lhh.com, and everyone can have access to Develop Me, and we just need to pace the coaching a little bit. Those of you that have asked already will definitely get to you. And then finally, we're doing some research on 2 related topics. So if you're willing to be interviewed, thank you so much for those from the last session who said yes. I will be in touch with you over the coming weeks. But I'm doing a bit of research on menopause. So menopausal women are the fastest growing demographic. So 1 in 4 women are thinking about leaving their job because of it. So I'd love to talk to anyone with any views or experiences on this. And then secondly, dual career partnerships. So how couples are enabling both careers to flourish while they're bringing up children. So if you're making this work, I'd love to hear from you. So let me know. Brilliant. So I'm going to open us up to hear from Sinead now. So let me stop sharing. So that would be good so that you can see her. So brilliant. Let me introduce Sinead, one of our client directors here at LHH and a huge role model to all of us for women in leadership. So Sinead, I know you have much to share on the subject. I hope I've left you enough time. Yes, a good or so, and then we'll take some questions and answers from the group as well. But yeah, just share what experiences, what thoughts have you got on confidence and resilience?
Perfect. Well, I guess I should start by saying that actually it's 3 years ago, I myself attended our own LHH Elevating Women in Leadership program. And therefore being invited in today, I guess I was reflecting a little bit on, well, what were my key reflections and developments, sort of takeaways that have really sort of built my resilience and confidence in particular. And it's quite interesting because actually what I picked out, I mean, everything inadvertently links, but what I really picked out was I came away with a real ability to see myself as a leader as I defined leadership. So that was a really big thing, and I think has really driven my resilience, particularly over the last 12 months. And I want to talk a little bit more about that. But interestingly also then acknowledgement of the imposter syndrome that I saw obviously rated quite highly there, and there's an understanding of that. So that's quite useful. So I think what I'd like to do, Orla, is just share a little bit more about why having clarity of leadership and seeing myself as a leader as defined by myself has been important. And then also, as I said, that imposter syndrome piece.
Lovely.
So I guess, let me start. My view of myself as a leader, it's quite interesting because before I went on a formal development program, I guess I was guilty, and I don't know if anybody else is guilty of this, as seeing leadership vertically. And I'm going to draw the pyramid with my hand here, because when we often talk about women in leadership, we talk about smashing the glass ceiling. There's a lot of reference to the top of leadership as it's defined. And actually that can be quite a challenge for women. And I thought it quite interesting when you were talking about career, energy, and different phases of our lives, because actually there are points in our lives where, you know, we may, from a vertical standpoint, pause a little, or just see things differently, find different stretch targets. And I certainly went into a leadership development program thinking, I've been selected. This is the first cohort across EMEA. This is all about my leadership journey and where I'm going to progress to, and I'm going to draw it vertically again. But I came out of that program as a leader. I went into it aspiring to it. I came out of it as leader. And that for me is really, really important, because fundamentally my job title hadn't changed. There'd been no great restructure. It was my mindset. And I think that's why I really value the time and the structure of these integral learnings, and kind of allowing myself to see myself differently, because I came out of it really valuing horizontal leadership and matrix leadership, which I think is really powerful for a lot of women, and hopefully a lot of women listening into this as well, because suddenly I realized that the impact I have in the business, and I am an individual contributor within our business, albeit a senior one, but I work globally across the business with colleagues, senior, junior, peer groups, with customers and clients out who may be out there, hello, but a very diverse range of stakeholders, and fundamentally representing our business, playing a very critical role, and actually having a real impact on the engagement of teams that I lead, project teams that I lead. But actually the definition of leadership and being really comfortable with myself as a leader really helped me be quite accountable and kind to myself in terms of what I was aspiring to achieve within the business, and not getting too caught up on a vertical ladder. And I think that's really important, because, if we learned anything from the last 12 months, we can't control and predict what changes are going to come along in our lives, whether that's some kind of macro pandemic, whether it's some restructure within an organization or something personal in our lives. And I sit here now in this virtual environment, and I think it's really interesting. I'm just clocking Abby's question to me there that I'll pick up on. But critically, we are living these virtual digital lives where the demarcation between work and personal lives has become increasingly blurred. And I think if we're not kind enough to ourselves, this can be really challenging. So I'm actually going to share a story, my own personal story, if you don't mind, because actually this view of leadership and where I am in my journey and my career has been really important to me, because I had experience where my husband left without any warning. I suddenly became a single mom. And then 2 days later, I was placed at risk of redundancy during a restructure and went through redeployment and pooling. Now that, I'm not going to lie, that was overwhelming. I remember feeling quite helpless for a temporary period of time. And I share this because actually the point being, none of us can predict what's about to happen. And we've just been through this pandemic. But critically, I think for all of us probably here today, we have careers and we have a choice. And I was able to choose at that point in time to really look at my career and think, what can I control? What's right? Now, in that redeployment scenario, I went for a promotion and was successful because I was able to demonstrate my capability, my potential, and the business saw that. However, I didn't take the role on the senior leadership team because at that point in time, with what was going on in my personal life, I recognized that probably wasn't the kindest thing to do for myself. I still had the capability, I still had the potential. The timing was wrong. And I'm actually very grateful that I was open with the business and said, this is what's happening. This is what's happening in my personal life. I don't think I can be there for the business. I don't think I can be as accountable to you as I need to be when I have all of this happening. And I say that because actually probably for a lot of us who've experienced various levels of this over the last 12 months, where we've been trying to judge what we can give and where are we at and at what point do we make a decision. And I think critically, under the guise of women in leadership as well, sometimes we can feel a little bit of pressure to take every opportunity as it comes along. And I think one of my great things is being really clear about myself as an individual contributor, being really confident about my ability within that and what I can deliver for a business, and saying I don't have to take every opportunity if the timing's slightly out. And I just wanted to share that linked to this, one of the things I did around building my own leadership development and outlook was I've been very deliberate about having women mentors. And it's something that naturally occurs when you go through a development program like this. You value the community, you respect, and you hear from others, and that sort of baseline understanding of where we're all at was really powerful for me. So I built that and continue to connect with it. And I remember sharing when I was going through this difficult personal journey at the time, it's only a few years ago, I remember sharing with a colleague who may be out there today, who said, I said, I'm really struggling with my leadership brand and whether or not I'm being inconsistent. So for me, I defined a leadership brand that was really great around, I'm going to be this consistent, steady, engaged, all of these things that were important to me and that I valued. And I said, I think because of what I'm going through, I'm up and down. I feel like I'm a bit of a roller coaster with my emotions. Now, interestingly, I'm sharing this because this is about 3 years ago. And of course, I think a lot of us probably did all of this last year and we're very forgiving of it. But for me, a few years ago, this was hard. And she said, wait a minute, Sinead, one of your greatest strengths is that you're really human. You're very empathetic and people connect with you. If you were completely consistent and steady, people wouldn't really continue to connect. Actually, possibly one of your strengths is to say, I'm going through a really tough time. I'm going to ride this through, give people confidence about the future, but be really open and honest about what you're going through. And interestingly, that happened to me at a time where I felt like I was the only person in the world going through it. But last year, I watched this all around me because everybody's journey was suddenly very individual and you couldn't predict what everybody's sort of personal circumstances are. And interestingly, obviously I did the single mom thing and I think a lot of people looked in at me going, oh, how are you doing all of that? There's a complete reframe and learning from me, which is everything we go through, when you've got a very clear leadership vision about what you want to be and in terms of how you turn up, really helped me last year. And it's interesting because I'm sure we all know Simon Sinek, but there was something quite powerful he shared as well that I caught. There's so much noise about self-help. Right? He talked about there is an abundance of self-help books out there, and actually it can be quite damaging to us because we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to help ourselves. Actually, one of the greatest things we can do is help others, because actually there's a very innate feeling and reward that we get from helping others. And one of the things I just wanted to share was that therefore last year, obviously for me, recognizing my own personal journey and then seeing everybody battling with some of this reframing, I'd already worked at a lot of reframing and I could help others through. So a lot of the strength I drew from last year, despite kind of that sort of strange environment we were all in, was actually in offering mentoring on advice and support to others. Selfishly, I got a lot from that, and it really helped me with some of the reframing that I was going through last year. So I just thought I'd share that as a bit of a journey in terms of kind of what I went through. So, and I'm mindful of time, Orla, so I just thought I'd very quickly just share as well. The other one was imposter syndrome, and I just wanted very quickly to touch on that for you, because for me, it's one that I knew when I went through the program, I acknowledged that this was something I battled with. And I still do. So, Orla, with intention, I can share with everybody, I absolutely love working with Orla. I think she's a fantastic woman in leadership herself. And I will always advocate for her. And with intention, so Orla's part of my sort of community and network of women. And she invited me to this. And I had that moment where I thought, why me? What can I give that's so different to what other, any of you, when you're telling a story, might give? I'm not the most senior and I'm not the most expert, but the reframe typically is often, why not me? And I'm sharing that little snippet because it is just a little snippet of the types of things that can come in, and we have to intentionally recognize. And Orla, I think you mentioned it, let's acknowledge that it exists. And I think when you create a network of women, you can immediately kind of acknowledge that. So I have a colleague in France she's one of the women that I don't even have to speak to in terms of sometimes mentoring. So if I get the self-doubt or the kind of, oh my gosh, I'm attending a meeting, look at all these amazing people, I'm going to get found out that I'm struggling to kind of contribute or add value. I can almost picture her response to me where she would roll her eyes and in a very French way, give me that kind of, are you kidding me? And I have it as a visualization, and it's enough to make a reset, but it's like anything, isn't it? I think if we can create pauses, just acknowledge where we are and pause, we can almost then kind of with intention work at things. And I guess I just wanted to share, I mean, there's a lot I can talk to around imposter syndrome, but I just wanted to share, but genuinely the community of women, that network of women, and being very intentional in terms of supporting each other, for me, that I draw strength from that in very different ways. And I'd really love everyone to feel stronger about it, because we're all very human, we're all going through ups and downs, and I think there's a community that really connects and gets that. So I just thought I'd kind of share that. And I am guilty that the time is ticking on. I could talk forever on this order, so
that's okay.
I'm going to pause and give it back to you.
Thank you. And I want to keep a space just to answer a few questions. And thank you for all of your comments. And you can see why I chose Sinead and she's a really popular speaker on our courses, because she's so open and really relatable, Sinead. You know, I think we can all really relate to the things that you talked about. So let's use the time for questions. The last, we've got 6 or so minutes for some of the questions. Leslie's monitoring, but I did see a few things pop up on the chat to ask you, Sinead, about, is there anything you do particularly for yourself to help with your resilience? You talked about, you know, helping other women, which is lovely, women advocating for women, but anything else personally that you is a must-have apart from wine and chocolate?
It's interesting, actually. I battle with some of the pure workshops on resilience, because I think sometimes we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be more resilient, to look after our well-being with more intention. And actually, I think there's a lot of social media noise, etc., out there that's not terribly healthy about creating these super women who are mastering all of these things. Actually, one of the things I wanted to share, therefore, that I've done with intent is, in this virtual digital age where life and home blurs, I've looked for smaller wins every day. And the smaller win might be me as a mum, it might be me as a friend, or it might be me as a colleague or client, but it exists every day. And I celebrate those wins. And I'm not great at articulating and advocating verbally for it, but I have a little book. I've got the little notebook, and I put it in there, and it smiles back at me and does make me feel good. But genuinely, you know, I'm a mum, I'm a leader as a mum, I'm a colleague, I'm a friend, you know, all of these things that make me who I am, that makes me, you know, kind of feel better about myself. I think that kindness helps me be more resilient.
Lovely, thanks, Sinead. And I've just noticed one of the let's answer this together. One of the questions on the Q&A was, so one of the things that drains my energy at work is dealing with a colleague who's more negative than me. So, and you know, I find it takes more energy to get them on doing. Have we got any tips for dealing with that? So what I call that mood hoover, you know, someone that sucks the life energy out of us.
I know exactly what that is, and I think so. There's a couple of things for me. I think that we've got to always capture the bits that make us feel really good, but specifically when I can picture these virtual meetings. I have a style where I am able to kind of poke fun at myself and laugh at myself a little bit. I sometimes use that to try and reset where someone is and kind of say, look, you know, I hear that, and I give them a bit of me, but in a jokey way as a reset. I'm not saying that always works, but but it's a style thing that feels right for me. But other than that, it is, you know, I know that women are guilty of ruminating, and one of the things I have learned to do as well is just get over yourself, move on. But I have to say that, by the way, I will say that frequently in there, you know, get over yourself. And maybe some of that happens a little bit quietly when I'm working with someone else where I see that as well. So
yeah, perfect. I think
approaches.
for me, I think when I'm dealing with those mood swings, I think first is making sure I've topped my energy up, because I know it's going to be drained. So having those conversations when I'm in the right space. But also, and maybe it's because of what I do, but I always would be try and get an understanding of that person and, you know, why they are like that, what is draining their energy, what's their negativity. So if I can get to the root cause of that, often then be a switch. So that helps me. So I become really curious about that person and why they might be behaving like that.
And because Orla is really lovely.
Yeah. So hopefully those are helpful to Sharon, who asked that question. Leslie, were there any more questions that for Sinead and myself?
We have one other question here asking, when will the programs be available to book? Because I know that there are women in our organization that would really benefit from these sessions. Yeah,
we'll look at launching an open program in September. So yeah, watch this space and we'll try and get that fixed up before these sessions end. So for those of you that are interested in diving a bit deeper. So yeah, we're just at time. So 2 minutes for people to grab a cup of tea, probably before your 12 o'clock. So want to thank you, Sinead, as always, for being open. I know there's lots of positive messages on the chat about your ability to be really relatable and inspiring for others. So thank you for joining us, and see everyone who wants to come again. We're back here next week at 11 o'clock. So look forward to hearing from you all, and have a great rest of the day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.